As threatened or promised, depending on how you want to look at it, here's a discussion of the configuration register. And one day, you're going to have to change this value. Most likely, it's going to be to perform some kind of password recovery. Could be for another purpose. And here's a warning I just want to give you one time. If you change the register to an incorrect value and then reload the router, you can actually disable the router to the point that Cisco can't bring it back. But there's no pressure. So when you read this the first time, it's like, oh yeah, this is something that I am really, really anxious to start working with. But I want to get you past the anxiety because you're going to type a few numbers, and obviously we're typing a few numbers a lot in this business, and it's something you can certainly do. I have picked up a lab router that we're going to work with. I'm going to show you how to do this, and this is going to be above and beyond the CSENT. I don't even know that they'll mention the configuration register on the exam. But I don't want to just mention it to you and say, oh yeah, you changed this thing like I did earlier, because we did mention the config register earlier in this section, and then not show you what it is. Also, I want to start getting you past the anxiety of this. And we're also going to talk about Cisco password recovery for a few minutes. This is not a topic on your CSENT exam, but I want you to see where to get the information from. There are a couple of things that I really wish someone had told me when I had started out studying this, and I want you to see it now. So just a few minutes, but it is important material. Of course, we got to be careful to get the config register setting correct the first time. We know that. Another key is to change the register back to the original value once you're done with your work. And to see what the current value is, you can run this command called show version. And let me bring that up. Right now, let's move this over. Like I said, slightly older router here just in case something terrible happens. It won't. But in all seriousness, this is a helpful command as well. It's kind of overlooked. It's going to show you your version, when it was compiled, that kind of thing. What I really like about this command is that it shows you how long the router's been up and why it was reloaded in the first place. Why was system returned to ROM by reload, etc. I really like this because sometimes, if you don't already know this, you'll learn it, that we have to play detective in this business, because if you're walking in and you're kind of a traveling troubleshooter like a lot of us are, going from one building to another, you're not always getting the straight story when you go in and ask people questions. It's not always, for evil intent, but every once in a while someone's doing a little CYA and saying, hey, I didn't bounce that router. I didn't know what you're talking about. I didn't, hit that power switch. I don't know what you're talking about. That router's been up for 372 days in a row. Then you run show version and you see it's been up for 6 minutes. Like, well, something's going on here. So there's a good piece of information there. It also shows you what your interfaces are. It's going to show you how much NVRAM you've got, how much flash you've got, etc. And down here at the very bottom, it shows you what the config register value is. I want to run that one more time because you'll notice it just says more at the bottom. And the first time you're looking for the config register, you're searching up here. It's like, okay, where is it? I know Chris said it was here, and it is. You usually just have to hit the space bar and drop down, and you'll see config register is X. So right now it's at 2102, and we're going to change that in just a moment. But something else I'll show you here on the board, and we'll see it live in a moment. 2102 is actually the default. And what that particular value does is it forces the router to look in its own flash for a valid iOS on the startup. Remember we mentioned, here's the order where it looks for the iOS. Well, this is another reason you might change the config register. It's not just for password recovery. If you want to change any of the orders that we talked about in this section, if you want to change the order in which it looks for the iOS, if you want to change where it looks for the startup config file, this is the kind of thing you would do. Now, some routers require you to set this value to 2142, which makes the router bypass the startup config file. So you're basically coming up to setup mode. Then you go from there. Again, we're not going to go through the entire password procedure for that particular router model, but I do want you to know that part. And that for Cisco password recovery, you have to be present at the router or switch to perform it. Ah, you were just going to telnet all over the place and do that, right? No, seriously, you can't telnet in and do any kind of password recovery. Every router, every switch is going to have some step built into the process where you actually have to physically be at the router and hit a button. So let's go ahead and just change this config register. I'll show you exactly how to do that with the config register command. And let's see, what are we going to change this one to? 2142? Sounds good to me. And that's it. No options, just config register and then the command, and that is it. And once we hit enter, go back to our prompt, nothing. We don't even get a confirm on this. We're not told your config register has successfully been changed, that kind of thing. So let's use our up arrow to repeat our commands, do show version. And here's a small little gotcha with the config register. You have to reload it in order for it to take effect. It does not take effect immediately. It even says config register is, and then it says will be 2142 at next reload. So then you could just go ahead and reload this router, and then it's set to 2142. What I was saying about setting it back when you're done, some password recoveries are going to require you to change the config register. Once you're done with it, once I reload this router and do a password recovery on it, the config is 2142, which means it's going to ignore the startup config file. Well, I don't want that to happen after I do the password recovery, right? I want to set it back to 2102, and that requires what? That requires another reload. So if you're doing any kind of procedure where you're changing this config register, any kind, password recovery, doesn't matter. When you're doing this, once you're done, make sure you change the config register back to what it was and you perform another reload, because that's what it takes to make that set. And that is really about it. I mentioned that here at the end. What I wanted to show you was something on Cisco's website and actually something in Google as well. And all I did was Google Cisco router password recovery. And you'll notice usually this password recovery procedures page is the top one. And you'll notice here is one for the 2600 and 2800 series. There are also a couple of good YouTube videos on there, even ones I didn't make that are good. But what I really wanted to show you is this one. And be careful if you're watching a video on YouTube, because there is no one single password recovery procedure. That's why I want to mention this. This is real world stuff for you, because what you do when you go to this page is it's got all these router and switch models indexed, all these devices, and you just click on the hyperlink to go to the series that you're working with. But as you can see, we've got a lot of different devices that we could be working with, and we've just got to be careful. You never want to use the wrong password recovery procedure for your particular device. So if you are watching a YouTube video, fantastic, nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of good stuff on YouTube to watch, but make sure that you're watching a video that matches the device that you're performing your password recovery on. And just one more quick reminder, Cisco even mentions it there. For security reasons, the password recovery procedures listed here require physical access to the equipment, because we sure don't want people telnetting in and changing our passwords or doing password recoveries. That is it for this particular section, and we'll just wrap it up right there. I'll see you on the next section.